This month has been chef's kiss, absolutely amazing. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about all of the books I read in January. I read 4 physical books and 2 audiobooks. Let's get into it. First off, I read The Night and the Moth, and this is my first read of the year and it was a 5-star read. I am in love with this and I can't believe I have to wait until September for the sequel. I'm just going to stare at the wall until then. This is about a young woman named Sable who is one of 6 diviners. These diviners live in this cathedral with this abbess and also a bunch of gargoyles. People come to the cathedral to get kind of prophetic dreams from the omens, and these diviners get drowned and have dreams where they sort of read the signs from the omens and vaguely tell these people's futures. This is quite unpleasant because it involves drowning and waking up and being sick and everything. They all wear these veils over their eyes that they can never take off, and they've all forgotten their names and are known by numbers. One day in the opening, this young 17-year-old boy king and a bunch of his knights show up to look for a prophecy from the omens, and Sybil gives them this prophecy and it's all quite negative. But he isn't really phased by it, and this kind of adds an element of mystery about his character. Sybil has a bit of a clash with one of his knights, Roderick Myandacious, and he kind of challenges her worldview. Then, when the other 5 diviners start gradually going missing, Sybil has to go to the knight and the king and ask for their help in finding out where they are. So, this is a little bit of a quest story. She ends up travelling with this knight and this king to a lot of the different areas of the map that you see at the front of the book. And I don't think I can say any more than that without spoilers. The world of this book was so rich. I really enjoyed the cathedral, the stained glass, the world building of this religious component. And I also liked that all of the locations they travelled to in search of the omens was all very distinct. And the plot elements of what actually happens when they go to each of these places is also quite distinct. So it doesn't feel repetitive, it doesn't get boring, even though they're looking for diviner after diviner. I also like that our main character Sybil goes through quite a big emotional and mental change over the story. At the beginning of the book, she has one kind of set worldview, and by the end, that's kind of turned on its head and challenged, which I really enjoyed. And while it was romantasy, it was very heavy on the romance. There was like one sex scene, but it remained very romantic. It didn't really stray into kind of smut territory, which I really enjoyed. And the emphasis of the story was more on Sybil's inner journey than on the romance itself. So I think this was more of a fantasy story with a subplot of romance rather than a straight romantasy. And one of the best characters in the story was actually the gargoyle who ends up going in this journey with Sybil and with the knights and the king. He is a really sweet, really funny character. He's always saying expressions but getting them wrong, and he calls everyone Bartholomew. And why he does this is a bit of a mystery in itself, which I won't spoil. But all in all, I really adored this. I loved it. I can't wait for the next one. I'm sad that it's over. And this was a really strong start to the year. So after reading that, of course, I went on to read One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, also by Rachel Gillig. I feel like because this series has been out for a little while, most people had read this one first before reading The Night and the Moth. I had a bit of a different experience coming back to this, and the vibes of the story is very different, but the writing style is similar, and the way the romance wasn't overly smutty, it was quite romantic, there was a lot of yearning. I really enjoyed that about this duology as well. This story is about a girl who has a monster called the Nightmare living in her head. This is because she's been afflicted with some kind of magical illness, which many people in this world fall prey to. And those that fall prey to the illness get kind of hunted down by the king and his men, and they're sort of captured and killed because of the magic that they show. And they also have this element of degeneration once they've got the sickness, so they might get some amazing magic when they develop it, but there's always a cost to every magic in this world, and so eventually this degrades their bodies and their minds. So this is what's happening with our main character. The setting of the story is kind of a fantasy world, although it's quite vague. I don't know if it's medieval, but there's castles. It feels to me like a later medieval period, perhaps. And there's a lot of folklore within the world. So this town, this city called Blunder, where they all live, is afflicted by a terrible mist, and the mist basically infects people and drives them crazy. There's a spirit of the wood, which lives in the mists and controls the mists. And there are also these Providence cards, kind of like a deck of cards, and each of the different kinds of cards have different powers, each of which have a cost to them. There's sort of folklore that if someone can unite the deck and spill infected blood, that this will cure the disease that's afflicting Blunder and also clear the mists from the city, which is kind of threatening to completely engulf them at this point. So our main character Elspeth basically ends up working with some highwaymen in the kind of underground criminal organisation to hunt down the cards and unite the deck to save herself and also everyone else from this illness. And again, that's probably all I can say without spoilers. Can't really tell you anything about book two because that will spoil book one. But I really enjoyed this. I would recommend it. It's a solid story and it's just such a vibe with the mists, this dark gothic atmosphere. It was a very misty month in January here where I'm living at the moment, and it was a very appropriate time to read this. I'm glad I waited for some reason, and the weather just magically tied in with my reading vibes. I will say though that I did prefer The Night in the Moth to this. Maybe if it had been the other way around, this would have blown my mind a little bit more. But I was like coming down from quite a high with The Night in the Moth, and this was just maybe not quite what I was in the mood for after the magic of The Night in the Moth. Next, let's go on to my audiobooks before I come back to my final physical book. Um, to stay on a fantasy kind of theme, I read The Starving Saints, which is a medieval horror that's kind of loosely based in a fantasy land, although I wouldn't call it a fantasy genre. The Starving Saints is about three women. It's told from each of their perspectives, kind of alternating chapters, and they are living in this castle which is under siege. They're all about to run out of food, and everyone is starving, and the enemy is at their door. The first woman we meet is Francine. She has committed a miracle in order to provide clean water for everyone. She doesn't know quite how she's achieved this. She's also managed to summon two little dragon like creatures that no one else can see, and the king has tasked her with solving this issue of no one having any food. So she's kind of experimenting with corpses and rotten food and trying to like make food appear out of nothing and perform a miracle, which she's struggling with. Our next character is Servoine, who is a lady knight. She is like second in command and very faithful to the king. She's really frustrated at the situation. She kind of wants to go out there and fight like the enemy because she can see how hopeless the situation in the castle is. But the king and her superior won't let her. The king starts toying with the idea that they have to start eating people in order to not starve to death, and she has some moral qualms about this. And that's kind of where we're at with her mentally when this inciting incident kicks off. And then third, we have Trela, who used to be a noble until her father was executed. She actually used to train swords with Servoine, who worked for her, and she had a bit of a crush on Servoine. But then everything comes crashing down. Her father is executed for treason by Servoine, and Trela has to kind of run away, learn to fend for herself, and basically live in complete poverty, nearly starve, etc. So she's found herself in this castle and she's stuck because of the siege, and she is experimenting, looking through all of the tunnel system and trying to find a way out of the castle. And we have these lingering feelings and resentments towards Servoine. Servoine doesn't know she's there, but she knows that Servoine is there, so that's a bit of tension. Then one day, out of nowhere, these saints that they all worship appear, but they're not quite right. Focine and Trela can tell that there's something not right with them, that they're not the real saints, and Servoine ends up kind of enthralled by them and losing her mind a little bit. And through this event, the three women are kind of brought together and have to figure out a way to free themselves and the rest of the castle from this crazy, oppressive force. And this is a horror, so there's a lot of, talk of cannibalism and other horrific things, some bodily mutilation and things like that occur, but I won't say any more. It was fantastic. The audiobook was really well read, and now I'm really into the idea of medieval horror. Even came up with my own medieval horror novel, which I started writing, which is a bit of a distraction from my main novel that I'm writing. Writer problems. And the other audiobook I read was Pine by Francine Toon. This is a wintry folk horror set in the Highlands of Scotland. It covers a few different POVs, but our kind of main character is a young girl who's about 10 or 11 called Lauren. Her mother went missing when she was about 1 or 2, and ever since, her and her father have been treated differently because the circumstances around it are a bit suspicious. I think people are suspicious of her father. On the day when this story starts, her and her father are going out trick or treating, and as they're driving through the forest in the Scottish Highlands, they see a woman in a dressing gown. Her father sort of reacts to her at first, but as soon as she's out of his line of sight, he seems to forget, whereas Lauren remembers. Later in the night, this woman shows up at their house and they end up taking care of her, giving her a bath. She seems very ill and not right. She's not speaking. And in the morning, she's gone, and Lauren's father has no memory of her ever having been there, and Lauren does. So this is a bit of a theme that goes on. Other people see her and sort of recognize this woman, but then completely forget as soon as she's out of their line of sight. And Lauren continues to remember. We meet a lot of different characters in this village in the Highlands and see how they all interact with each other. And I don't want to spoil it, the tension just kind of builds as we work out this mystery of who this woman is, what's going on, and also what happened to Lauren's mother 10 years ago when she went missing. There's some kind of folklore, supernatural elements in here, but there's also, the horror of man, which is always what I like in a good thriller, having that question of is there something supernatural going on or is there a more human crime? And kind of switching between the two in your theories. This was also a really well performed audiobook. It was very Scottish. All of the Scottish accents were great. I'm guessing the reader was Scottish herself. And the writing, there was a lot of good Scottish references in there. There was a lot of talk of Cayleys, Highlander crisps, lots of references that I understood being Scottish myself. So I really enjoyed this and I would definitely recommend it. And then my final read of the month, which I finished kind of perfectly on the 31st, also started the night in the Moth perfectly on the 1st, was Direbound by Sable Sorensen, which is actually the pen name for two friends that co-wrote this book together, which I think is pretty cool. And this was so good, so exciting. I loved it. This book is quite similar to Fourth Wing in its premise, but a lot of the way the plot acts out is quite different, so if you liked Fourth Wing, you will like this, but it's also different enough to kind of keep your attention. This is about a common girl named Merrin who lives in the poor quarters of this city, which has a bit of a hierarchy to it. The people at the top of this hierarchy, kind of up there with the royals, are the Direbound, and these are elite soldiers that are soul bonded to dire wolves. In these poor quarters where Merrin lives, children keep going missing. She presumes kidnapped for the siphons, which are a kind of vampire like creature that drains people's life force, particularly children, and the country has been at war with them for a good 500 years. One day her sister goes missing, taken by the nabbers, and in order to get her sister back, she joins the military, thinking she can go to the front lines, cross the border, and go and find her. However, this year that she happens to join is a year where they're doing the bonding trials, which is where everybody, whether you're elite or not, if you want to join the military, you have to go through the bonding trials and try to bond with a wolf. So she does this. The kind of first stage in the bonding trials is going up this mountain to the very top where the dire wolves are. It involves getting there as quickly as possible if you want to bond, which she's not bothered about. She just wants to go into the normal military. But she ends up making some friends, some allies, and going up the mountain the quick way, and thus getting the opportunity to bond. And she doesn't want to bond. She's telling all the wolves telepathically, don't bond with me because this will hold me up from the front for 4 months. But then this feral direwolf who doesn't want to speak bonds her against her will. So now Merrin is blocked from her mission to go and save her sister and has to participate for 4 months in these bonding trials. There's this alpha general guy called Stark who seems to have it out for her, seems like a bit of an enemy, and the prince also takes a liking to her, and that's all I'll say. That's on the blurb. And I don't think I can say anything more without spoiling the book. But there was so many twists and turns. I was like, at certain points, I had so much fun. Read it within 5 days. Loved it. Writing quality wise, I thought it was a bit better than some other romantices. It didn't make me cringe as much as ACOTAR and Fourth Wing. And the twists and the emotional beats and like all of the theories that I had reading Fourth Wing, I got a similar feeling reading this with all of these twists and turns too. So if you're a romantasy fan, you absolutely have to read this. You will love it. It will drive you insane. And if you're like a little bit iffy on romantasy, you quite like it, but some of it bothers you, give this one a go because it was actually really good. I would say it's one of the better romantasies that I've read. Give it a chance and just have fun. This is a super fun read and it won't take you very long, even though it is quite thick. And I can't wait for the sequel, which is out in May. So I've got 4 months to wait, not too long. Enough time that I'll be hungry for it when it finally arrives. And that's it. That's everything I read in January. Let me know what you read this month and if there's anything you'd recommend. And let me know what you're planning on reading in February. I'll see you next month for another wrap up, and maybe next week I'm going to do a bit of a spoiler deep dive into Direbound because I just have to talk about this with somebody and I don't know anyone else that's read it and I want to get into all of the spoilers. So if you've read it, tune in for that one and we'll talk about it. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!